With the Eagles coming into their Week 8 matchup with the Commanders, fresh off of a defensive performance that forced the best offense in the NFL into their worst showing of the season, there was a lot of expectations that the Eagles defense would dominate the Commanders, especially when you consider the Commanders had just put up a measly 7 points against the Giants the week prior, and the Eagles secondary was at its healthiest point since Week 1. But Sam Howell had what was probably his best day as a pro, and the Eagles defense looked inept. So what happened, and is this something we should be concerned about going forward? When a defense gives up 472 yards in a game, the blame usually falls on more than just one person, whether that's coaching and play calling, execution by the players, or injury. On Sunday, all three were a factor to varying degrees, but the biggest culprits were execution and play calling. While execution was an issue throughout, as we'll see in many of the plays we look at, there was a very important turning point in the play calling following the Commanders' second drive of the second half. The Commanders came into their rematch with the Eagles with a clear goal in mind: lean on the quick passing game and attack inside in the underneath and intermediate area. Only 9 of their passes were thrown outside of the numbers beyond 5 yards, and 23 of their passes were thrown within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Sam Howell had his fastest time to throw of the season this game. Eric Bieniemy had a good feel for the Eagles defense and an excellent plan to get the Commanders into looks to take advantage. They used 3-by-1 sets on 60% of their passing plays, compared to 30% of their sets being in 2-by-2. Here's why. When in zone coverage against 3-by-1 looks, oftentimes the Eagles have their middle linebacker, usually Nicholas Morrow or Nakobe Dean, lined up over the number 3 receiver. With the amount of cover 4 and cover 6 the Eagles run, the linebacker consistently gets isolated one-on-one inside, and if you put a receiver in this spot, like the Commanders did so often, it can create a lot of mismatches. I also discussed in my review of the offense against the Jets that manipulating the rules of the linebacker in quarters-based coverages is a good way to open up space inside, which is exactly what we see on this play. When the Eagles are in man coverage, it's pretty well known that they are reluctant moving Slay or Bradbury inside to match up against receivers in the slot. The problem with this is that it can force safeties to have to cover receivers one-on-one. The Commanders do a nice job of aligning with an inside stack and using a route combination that is highly likely to get Jahan Dotson matched up with Reed Blankenship. I love Reed and think he's a great player, but this isn't a matchup that he's going to win often. There's not many safeties in the league that you're going to feel comfortable with covering Dotson one-on-one for extended periods. We'll come back to this play later. To illustrate just how much 3-by-1 sets were a factor in the Commanders' game plan, consider this. The Commanders used a 3-by-1 set on every single 3rd or 4th down besides 2 plays. One was a 3rd and 1 run play on the 3rd play of the game. The other was an empty set tight end screen on 3rd and long. The Commanders either went to a standard trips formation where they moved around the receivers and tight ends to get matchups they wanted, or they used bunch sets, which are great 3rd and medium to short formations to combat the extremely high percentage of man coverage teams use in those situations. Considering how much the Commanders wanted to attack using quick passes or passes inside, Sean Desai's play calling for most of the game did not help put his players in good position to combat the Commanders' strategy. The Eagles used zone coverage on 67% of the Commanders' pass plays in the first half. In zone, 47% of those plays were some form of cover 4, 6, or 8, which, as we already talked about, allows a team to attack the linebacker playing the middle hook. The Commanders completed 100% of their passes in the first half against those looks. Now, the Eagles players often didn't execute well anyway, as we see here, as Bradbury gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar, as he's got his eyes in the backfield and he bites on the run action. Slay misses a tackle here that should have kept a 4-yard gain from turning into 9. Here the Eagles are trying to change the read and drop Nolan Smith into coverage, but he doesn't carry the receiver deep enough, while Reed is too far off in coverage, knowing he's supposed to match number 2 vertical. I think he took his eyes off of the receiver when he went inside, assuming he was running an underneath route. Going back to the Eagles' use of zone coverage in the first half, they ran cover 3 on 29% of plays and cover 2 on 24% of those plays, mainly in a prevent mode during the Commanders' 30-second drive before half. The Eagles didn't execute well in cover 2 or cover 3 either, as they gave up 100% completion rate overall in zone coverage in the first half. In the first half, Sam Howell completed 24 of 26 passes for 226 yards with 2 touchdowns and a quarterback rating of 128. He averaged 8.7 yards per attempt despite having an average throw depth of 5.4 yards. The only 2 incompletions came when the Eagles ran man coverage. In the second half, Sam Howell was 15 for 26 for 171 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 sack, plus an intentional grounding, and a quarterback rating of 87. His average yards per attempt was 6.6 despite almost doubling his average throw depth at 10.1 yards in the second half. So what happened? In the second half, in order to counter the Commanders' passing attack, Sean Desai employed more man coverage and cover 2. On pass plays, they went from 33% man coverage in the first half to 43% in the second half. Cover 4, 6, and 8 usage was dropped to 24% of their zone plays, while cover 2 and 3 increased to 35% each. Switching to cover 2 over the quarter's base coverages puts 5 defenders underneath compared to the 3 to 4 available in cover 4 and 6 variations. Man coverage is a good strategy for stopping quick passes, as there is a guy ready to account for a receiver at all points in times, as opposed to zone coverage, where defenders can be manipulated more easily. Of Howell's 14 incompletions, 9 came against man coverage. But that wasn't the most important schematic change in the second half. The first drive of the second half, the Eagles were able to get off the field within 5 plays. The next time out, the Commanders went on a 15-play scoring drive. The Eagles blitzed on 4 of the 11 pass plays. Of the 4 plays where they blitzed, they gave up 3 receptions for 40 yards, which comes out to 10 yards per attempt. The 7 plays they didn't blitz resulted in 23 yards, or 3.3 yards per attempt. This was also an issue in the first half, where they gave up 78 yards on 7 attempts when blitzing, for an 11.1 average per attempt, plus 1 defensive pass interference. After this drive, the Eagles blitzed just 1 more time in the game. After the second drive of the second half, when the Eagles stopped blitzing, Sam Howell was 6 for 13 for 93 yards, with 1 interception and his only sack of the day. What's more, if you don't include his last drive, where the Eagles were clearly in prevent mode, Howell was 2 for 9 for 21 yards. During these 3 drives were some of the most crucial moments of the game, as it included the interception that led to a scoring drive to take the lead, and the Hassan Reddick sack to give the Eagles the ball back in their own territory to go up 2 scores. The Commanders' plan to attack underneath and inside took advantage of the blitz virtually every time. It wasn't until Desai stopped blitzing, while also implementing more cover 2 and man coverage, that the Eagles slowed down the Commanders. Let's dive a little deeper to take a look why. Even when in cover 1, the Eagles gave up catches on 6 of 7 passes for 85 yards when blitzing. Playing man coverage on a receiver in the NFL is extremely difficult, with the rules favoring the offense heavily. In order to give themselves the best chance at covering, defenders will play with inside or outside leverage to help put themselves in better position against certain routes, while trying to funnel other routes to their help defenders, whether that's a deep safety or a linebacker playing the middle hole or someone else. But when you blitz, you're taking away one of those defenders that would be there to help funnel the receiver into. This greatly affects the defender's ability to play man coverage because they can't play their leverage as hard, knowing that they have one less defender to funnel routes to. This is why Reed was in a very difficult position in off coverage on 3rd and 7 against Jahan Dotson running right at him. Dotson could break his route either way, and he's gonna beat Reed. If there was a player inside to help take away the inside dig, Dotson is likely not open on the play, and Reed can also play with outside leverage in case Dotson were to run a corner or different outbreaking route. Let's look at another play. The Commanders come out in bunch. The Eagles decide to lock the bunch here, meaning every defender is matched up with one receiver and is following them no matter where they go. This is tough for Slade to have to navigate through all that traffic, but if the Eagles kept a whole player instead of blitzing, you have this route taken away. We'll come back to this play later too. When the Eagles didn't blitz and played cover 1, they held Howell to 5 completions on 11 attempts for 56 yards, 5.1 yards an attempt, and 1 sack. Look at how Cunningham, as a whole player, is able to get in the way of the throwing window on the quick slant to take away his first read, then moves with the quarterback and gets the deflection on the scramble. Here, on Reddick's sack, the Eagles get creative. With Terry McLaurin in the slot, they have Bradbury over top of him and then bracket him with Byard. Notice how Bradbury zones off his coverage once McLaurin goes inside. With McLaurin bracketed, Reed is now going to help over top of the tight end and number 3 receiver. When the tight end goes inside, he can help Eli Ricks on the crossing route coming over. The Eagles also use that extra defender to bracket McLaurin on another play as well. Notice how Bradbury again zones off when the receiver stays underneath. It looks like they've worked on their bracket techniques after what happened last week. But on the other side, the Eagles have also corrected their earlier issue when locking the bunch. On the previous bunch play we looked at, the Eagles had 2 defenders at the same level, which made it harder for Slade to navigate inside. This time, the 3 defenders all make sure to get on separate levels, so there is room to move. Cunningham does a great job disrupting the release of the point man, and Slade is able to break hard on this slant, which ultimately ends up incomplete. Desai also had a nice changeup to the Commanders' trips formations. Here, he moves Slay inside to play over top of the number 3 and has Cunningham line up over the tight end on the solo receiver side. This alignment indicates the Eagles are going to be in man coverage, but at the snap, they rotate into cover 2, with Slay being the pole runner. Howell ends up throwing underneath, where Ricks and company rally and stop the Commanders short on 3rd down. I thought it took a while, but Sean Desai eventually adjusted and started putting his players in good positions to take away what the Commanders were trying to do. But even then, the players did not execute well for most of the afternoon. I'm always a believer that execution matters more than play calling, provided the play calling isn't putting the players in bad positions. A good play call does not matter at all if the players don't have their eyes in the right place, if they don't communicate or play with the right leverage, or maintain their gaps or tackle. The Eagles players had issues with this across the board, so I can't review this defense without touching on some of these plays. We'll start with this play with Reed. He was pretty straightforward after the game that he did not play well, and he's right. He spoke about this play where he said he played with the wrong leverage and bad eyes. The Eagles are running cover 1, and though they aren't blitzing, they're using the linebacker to spy, which pulls him towards the line of scrimmage. They are also doubling McLaurin with the middle post safety, so Reed has no inside help. He has to maintain inside leverage with nobody inside to help, as that is the easiest throw for a quarterback. He'll concede outside leverage because an outside breaking route is a harder throw. But like he said, he gave up inside leverage. He said he had bad eyes, so I'm assuming he meant he has his eyes on the shoulders or head of the tight end instead of reading his hips. On the Commanders' last play, they have Reed playing as the robber on the opposite side of trips. This is the perfect play call to help Bradbury take away the crossing route, but Reed loses the man and doesn't get deep enough. Overall, Reed admittedly didn't have a great day, but that's not something I'm too worried about considering how well he's played throughout his short career. Guys have bad games. It's impressive to see him battle through and create what might have been the biggest play of the day for the defense. The Eagles are in cover 8 while locking Bradbury and Cunningham in man coverage on the backside. Typically against trips, Reed will look to the trip side for any crossing routes, but this time, he knows he has McLaurin on the backside, so he isn't moving to the front side right away. He reads how he'll take a quick drop, stays patient in his back pedal, and puts himself in position to capitalize on an errant throw. Other players had issues as well. We touched on Bradbury's touchdown he gave up already. Sidney also gives up one here. I don't know the Eagles rules, but typically, cover 3, 5-man blitz rules require that he carries the number 2 receiver up the seam. On another play, Byard lets up an inside slant for a big gain to the tight end in man coverage. Notice here how the Eagles defense is able to switch off responsibilities between the slot corner and linebacker because they didn't blitz. Just need better coverage from Byard. Ricks had a few nice plays, but also some rookie mistakes. Here, the Eagles use their man coverage disguise before rotating into cover 2 again. Ricks jumps the underneath route and opens up a window behind him on 4th down. Luckily, the pass is dropped. But here's the first down line. Ricks has to let the underneath route go and rally to the ball if thrown there. On the play before this one, it's a little hard to assign blame, and I think their constant rotation in the secondary is partly to blame for the mix-up here. But the Eagles have a nice design to counter this bunch look. They lock the number 1 and number 2 receiver and have Reed, who's rotating down as the robber, helping to bracket McLaurin again. The problem is, Cunningham doesn't cover McLaurin when he runs outside. Maybe he assumed he was going inside after his initial stem, so he zoned off his coverage. But I'm not sure Cunningham is who was supposed to be covering McLaurin. There's some confusion pre-snap. I think the coaches want Cunningham on the tight end instead of Ricks, but I'm not in the meeting room. Either way, lack of communication and execution leads to a wide open player, but luckily the pass is dropped yet again. Now, some of the miscommunication and lack of execution is on the coaching staff for their preparation leading into the game. However, I'm inclined to give Desai a little slack instead of overblowing the situation, considering this is their 8th different starting group in 8 games in the secondary. They're rotating in 2 rookies at slot, one of which has never played slot before, and they added a new safety midweek. Considering some of the performances they've put up to date, I don't think this game is a huge concern, but they are entering the toughest part of their schedule, so the margin for error is only going to continue to get slimmer. It will be important to see these issues get cleaned up going into Dallas week.